Okay. Welcome, everybody, back to Break Down the Poets and the Poems, a conversation series to spread awareness of poets and their poetry as inspiration and motivation for everyday lives. I am your host, Tamara J. Madison. I am also a poet. And our guest for today is Mr. Gary Jackson and his book, Origin Story. All right. This particular series of breakdown, we are talking about lineage literature. Poets who are writing specifically about their lineage or they're heavily influenced by it, right? And so this was the perfect book to dive into. Welcome, Poet Gary Jackson. How are you?
I'm doing well. Thanks, Tamara, for having me on this series and the breakdown. And so, yeah, I'm super excited, especially to talk about Origin Story, which isn't my latest book, but I'm glad that there's still a little bit of shine on it. So thank you for having me come out.
Thank you for bringing that up
Yeah,
because typically I do not always do a poet's latest book.
yeah.
I do the thing that I'm particularly drawn to. And because this was a lineage book, it was
Mhm.
perfect. And thank you for squeezing in a little time for me before you go on the book tour with your new book. And remind me when we come to the close of the of this session. Remind me that I want you to be sure to speak about what your next project is.
Oh, okay, sure,
Okay,
yeah.
in case I get too excited. All
No,
right.
it's okay. It's all right.
So I'm going to start with your bio. Born and raised in Topeka, Kansas, Gary Jackson is the author of the poetry collections Small Lives, Origin Story, and Missing You Metropolis. He is co editor of The Future of Black Afrofuturism, Black comics, and superhero poetry. His poems have appeared in numerous journals, including Callaloo, The Sun, Los Angeles Review of Books, Gulf Coast, and Copper Nickel. He is also published in several anthologies, including Shattered, the Asian American Comics Anthology, African American Poetry, 250 Years of Struggle and Song, and A Measure of Belonging, 21 Writers of Color on the New American South. He received fellowships and residencies from Cave Canem, Breadloaf Writers Conference, and Art Omi. He's taught classes and led workshops everywhere from New Mexico to South Carolina to South Korea. He is currently the Toy Darracott Endowed Chair of English in the Dietrich School of Arts and Sciences at the University of Pittsburgh and the director of the Center for African American Poetry and Poetics. Welcome again, Mr. Jackson.
Thank you. Thank you for having me. And I always forget about that little blurb in my bio about being published in that Asian American Comics anthology. So that's a good kind of, introduction to the book that we're going to talk about since it's about being biracial and all those things. So yeah,
Absolutely.
thank you.
Absolutely. All right, so that's my first question. Why did you choose to write about your origin story?
So this really interesting thing happened after I published my first book, Missing You Metropolis. So when that book came out, it of course opened a lot of doors for me in terms of like my writing and kind of career. But the other thing that I thought was really interesting was my family suddenly saw me in this different light. They were like, "Oh, this kid's over here writing poems." They're like, they're like, "Oh, he's published." And they were all like, "Can you write about us?" Which was very surprising. And I don't know about you, but like most of our families, I think would want the opposite, prob- probably. But they were like, can you write about us? Like, my grandfather, who's actually on the cover of the book, was like, he was teasing
Oh,
me. Yeah, he was like, when are you gonna put me in one of your books? Is what he
so
told
that's
asked me.
actually your real grandfather.
Yes, yeah. So on the cover,
Oh my goodness.
those are my grandparents. So which we can talk about too, but like, well, I'll just say really briefly. So the cover right here, um, shout out to University of New Mexico Press because they took my feedback, like they were very generous with like accepting my feedback and like kind of helping co-design the book. And they invited me to send like some photos and some ideas, and share kind of what I was envisioning for the cover. And I'd sent them all these family photos, not knowing, what they were going to do with them. I think the only rule I had was I didn't want myself on the cover, because I felt like I wasn't really the main character or speaker in this collection, even though I'm kind of the guiding voice. Um, but yeah, so they took that photo. That's like kind of a, you know, um, like divided photo that they put on there that is like the wedding picture of my maternal grandparents.
Oh my
Um,
goodness. It
and
is
I just
absolutely beautiful.
yeah, no, thank you. And if you look really close, I know you can probably see it, Tamara. The audience probably who watch this video may not be able to, but you can see like little scratch marks and pin marks on the photo, and those are my mother's marks. Like I think when she was a kid, she like marked on it.
Okay.
Um, so there's a little bit of like each of what I think are kind of like the three central figures kind of imprinted on the cover.
Wow.
But yeah, so she invited me out to her home in Dallas, Texas. This would have been, I think, the same year Missing You Metropolis came out. So like 2010, 2011. And she said, we're gonna sit down and we're gonna talk. And I want you to record these conversations. And she said, and we'll go through all these old photo albums because my mother has like this wonderful memory
Mm.
and I have a terrible memory. So I forget books I read, I forget like things I do like just a week ago I've already forgotten. And so it was great to have her kind of reintroduce me to all of these family stories and myths through these old photo albums. And after like a week of doing this, it was kind of like, okay, now go on and write your poems. It didn't turn out to be that easy. And even though I was writing these poems, I think it was working okay, but it just took a long time. And even by the end of this like 8 years or however long it took me to write this, it felt like something was missing. And a good friend of mine, another poet, suggested, she says, well, you have those interviews with your mother. And she was like, why don't you take those interviews and turn those into poems? She's like, let those become kind of an artifact as well, instead of just this secondary or primary source that you're relying on. Which was a genius idea. And so I went with that, and that took another year or two to do. Um, and so this book took about a decade to write. Like I'm a pretty slow writer. Um, but even for me, that yeah, I was like, oh, this is taking a really long time. So once I had these interview erasure poems done that are like in the book, it felt like everything clicked. And then I like started sending it out to get published. And by then I was ready to like move on. But yeah.
Okay. So I have to back up just a little
Yeah.
bit. I
Yeah.
have to ask you this. So, which side of your family wanted you to write the book? And was there resistance from the other side? Let's put it that way.
Yeah, yeah. So, there wasn't any resistance. So no one in my family said they didn't want me to write poems about them, honestly.
Wow.
So like one thing is even my father, and I'm not close to my father. He just wasn't around, when I was a kid. So I don't really have a very strong relationship with him, but we talk from time to time. But even he told me once, or he didn't tell me, he told my mother, um, that he would like me to write about him too. And my dad is not the best man in the world. He was in prison for a while. He lives out in LA now. Um, and he's in this book too a little bit, and I think also in my first book. And so my mother was like, well, like, why would you want him to write about you is what she asked him. And I think like anybody, he wants to be remembered. He's just like, if he's capable of telling some stories about our family, why not?
Wow.
And the same thing with my maternal grandmother, who's Korean. Um, I kind of reconnected with her once, once I had my first book come out. And my grandmother has since passed away, but while I was in the process of writing this book. But even she was like very receptive um to what I was doing, and I have like aunties, some who are black, some who are black and indigenous, some who are black and Korean, or no, some who are Korean. And it would surprise me. Like sometimes I'd visit family and some of them would even have my books. And I didn't know that they were reading me even.
Wow.
So yeah, it's still strange a little to me about
That's
how
an
proud they were.
unusual gift.
Yeah.
That's an unusual gift because, like you said, when you first started, in our community, people are quick to say, "All right, now, don't air the dirty laundry."
Yeah.
Listen, right? That's
Yeah.
nobody's bit. And I think what our generation and generations following have found is that keeping the secrets doesn't really get us anywhere because they find a way to crop up in
Hmm.
unhealthy ways anyway. So, airing all of that out and releasing it is actually a very powerful and really beautiful thing. And I think it's just amazing that your family was already there. You didn't have to do a lot of push and pull or convincing them. And
No.
I want to, you've already answered a couple of my questions, but I was so excited, I forgot to read you your blurb, right? So, I always challenge myself when I do a book for this platform. I challenge myself to write a blurb, my own style of blurb. And this was giving me trouble. Like there are times when I'll read a book and I don't know where to go. I wake up the next morning, the blurb is already there. There are other times when the blurb comes automatically. And with this one, I was like, what am I going to do for the blurb? And I just kind of stopped thinking about it. And I started working on the poems that I wanted to pull for you to read. And this is the blurb that came to me. In Origin Story, poet Gary Jackson cautions us that the greatest story ever told is not from myth or magic, Marvel or DC, or even from the holy books. The greatest story ever told is our own blood origin story, good, bad, mixed. And our real superheroes are those we love, those who inspire us, and those who lovingly haunt us for life.
That was beautiful. Thank
Yeah.
you. That's
Yeah,
yeah.
and it just I was like, "Oh, that's it." You know what I mean? And it was I
Yeah.
had to just pull back
Hmm.
and stop thinking about it and
Hmm.
just kind of let it come, kind of let it come. So that's the blurb that I have for you. So let's start with, we're not going to go in chronological order or the order of the book.
That's
Let's start with Twiggy on page
okay.
15.
Yeah.
And while you are looking for it, if you would please define Twiggy for us because they don't have the book.
Yeah, so Twiggy is this term, it's a Korean term that kind of means it's a my understanding is that it originally the original kind of denotation for the word is like a farm animal, like
Mhm.
hybrid, um like a mixed animal. And it's since my understanding is that it's become a derogatory term in Korea. So they use it to call like biracial people like a slur, basically. So meaning animal hybrid, meaning like especially like darker skinned um Koreans or people who have mixed blood. Because at least during the time, and I guess I should rewind. So like I lived there for about a year in 2009, 2010. I was there. And funny note, the thing that brought me back um was my first book being accepted. So
Mm.
I had like left, my wife and I had sold everything, almost everything, and we just went to Korea to teach. Um, and just we were kind of set to live there for a couple years. And then I got a call and it was Kave Kanam And they were like, "Hey, you won this poetry prize. You got to bring your butt back here if you want this if you want this prize." And I was like, "Okay, I will." So anyway, but while I was there, that's when I became familiar with that term,
Mm.
Twiggy. And so I can read the poem if that's what.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Okay. And I think it's the only poem maybe in the collection, I can't remember now, that actually uses like Korean, like in the title,
Hmm.
the characters. Twiggy. Not every mulatto is created equal. Some get heckled on subway cars, lynched, or celebrated in ticker tape parades. My mother can't speak a lick of Korean and doesn't give a damn. Never says mulatto, but calls both of us mutts, though I can't pass for shit but black. Ask the audience as I stroll in late. We could use a Heinz Ward to show us the way. Tell the boys shouting Twiggy on the subway. All of us are animals, our hybrid of body, of place. Mornings, I dream of kinked hair and cry. My mother's mother forgets who we are, speaks Korean over our heads, lost in language. My mother only nods. I know few words, my tongue full of friction. Say, Oma, raise us back into memory, into word, into place. Once a woman pressed into the pink nail beds of my fingers, said she could see my blood. My mother, mistaken for Hawaiian, for Indian, for everything but what she is. When I say I'll have no children, she says, I guess we'll be the only two left. Somewhere we are understood. My mother opens her mouth.
Why is that the last line? What does that mean to you? My mother opens her mouth.
I think it was so for this poem in particular, I can't remember when I wrote it in relation to like collecting the poems for this book. But I think at the time I understood that like one of the things I wanted to do or kind of challenge myself to do was somehow let my mother kind of speak through me. Um, and I think early on I realized that I was here to kind of bear witness to these stories. But what I really wanted to do is kind of privilege the people in my family, um, to kind of go back to your blurb, to let my family kind of speak their own stories and have the opportunity to tell them instead of having somebody else tell it for them. And I was also very aware that even though my role here is as poet and as witness, um, I also have my own blinders and biases, right? Like there are things just because we're writers, right? We get to ultimately frame the narrative and construct these speakers however we want. And so it was a constant kind of challenge for myself to how well I could kind of free myself from those blinders or kind of open this frame um in a way that I could kind of let them shine more than beyond my control. And so I think for me, that line kind of is trying to like project outwards that she gets to speak um, at some point. Maybe not even within that poem, um, but one day she will if she hasn't already. So it kind of ends on this hopeful note. Um, and then, when I was sequencing the book, I realized that like, oh, this might be a good poem to kind of introduce what are these interview poems that I referenced earlier. So right after that poem, there's an interview poem that basically is her voice, like entirely, like governs that poem. So I thought it was a good way to kind of introduce like this new kind of persona, being my mother, you know.
So I have a couple of questions around that. One,
Yeah.
did it ever bother you for your mother to call you Mutt?
No, no, it
No,
didn't.
it didn't.
It
It
didn't.
didn't.
She always kind of, and she only said that like once or twice. I mean, she said it a few times growing up. Um, because the other thing I don't think is in this book, if I'm being honest, Taylor, but one
Mhm.
thing is on my father's side, and I'm kind of writing these poems now, but on my father's side, like his mother, so like my paternal grandmother was also biracial, but she was Chicana and black.
Mhm.
Um, so my mom always used to joke like, "Boy, you got everything in you." Like she used to say. And so yeah, and we used to joke about just how our whole family was that way. My grandfather, when he divorced my grandmother, my maternal grandfather, when he divorced my grandmother, he remarried an indigenous woman in Kansas, and so they had children. And so I have all these aunties and uncles who are like half indigenous, half black, who are my mother's, half siblings. And my mother is Korean and black, and then she has siblings who are Korean. And so it's like our family just kind of is the quintessential melting pot, and we just grew up that way, thinking like that was normal, that's just how it is. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, and it never bothered me. Like we used to joke about things like that all the time. My mother jokes, she still jokes about how discrimination works towards her. Once during the pandemic, she told me something like when people discriminate towards her, she said something along the lines of like, boy, she's like, I'm black, I'm fat, I'm Korean, I'm old. They could take their pick about why they hate me. Like she
Mhm.
said. And I think that's always been our language, just to add humor, to add some levity to these realities that we kind of have to exist in and navigate. But yeah.
I want to pull up this line again. All of us are hybrid of body, of place. And I think it's really interesting because when you think about what we believe to be the history of the world, and you think of all of the conquerings that have taken place, all of the oppression that has taken place, all around the world for thousands upon thousands of years, right? It's interesting how human beings get amnesia after a certain point, and people think of themselves as being pure blood, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Is there any such thing at this particular point, really? Is there any such
Right.
thing? So
Yeah.
I think it's interesting that you all were able to embrace that, right? Instead of running or ducking and dodging and hiding it. And I did not realize actually until this moment, and I'm going to try not to get choked up about it, but I didn't realize until I heard you reading this piece. I've never said this in public except to my sister. My father was in the Korean War.
Mhm.
And there's a memory of him talking about a little boy that he wanted to bring back. And at one particular time, we saw pictures of him with a particular woman. And my sister and I have often wondered if we have another sibling somewhere.
Mhm.
And if that person is trying to find us, right? Or
Yeah.
how could we find them? And she and I have had conversations about that many times. And I never thought about it while I was reading this book until I heard that poem
Oh my God.
in your voice. And so, who knows, maybe this will find its way to that person if there is such a person. But I think that's another reason why this book was a little bit of a challenge for me subconsciously. I don't think I really even thought about it at that time.
Yeah.
But I want to move to the next poem. I'm going to ask you to read Reunion.
Yeah, okay. I'll read Reunion. Yeah. And then we could talk about it. Reunion 1. Almost midnight, your sister blooms into a bruised heart, miming your father's fists, recalling how your mother just stood there, smoking. It's not heartbreak, not yet. Only a teenage girl after school using furniture polish as deodorant. He called me a stupid country girl, said they should have left me in Korea. The car straddles both lanes. You just want to get home. Do you understand why I never called? I didn't hate you, but you understand. Do you understand? Standing in the Holiday Inn, you hug the hurtling bones of your sister, not because you understand, but because you remember the stray cat on Halloween and how you wanted to keep him. So you put the cat in the bag, and your grandmother made you throw all the candy sticky with fur away. Your sister took the blame, took the beating, and you placed all those years and the people inside them deep into the earth and kissed each gravestone and haven't eaten a Mary Jane since. Two. But it's not heartbreak until the next day, having breakfast with your mother and her nurse, and there's nothing you can say to get her to remember your name until you show the photo of your father in uniform, her in her white gown, and she calls his name. So you call him and put her on the phone, and she tells him she misses him. And when is he going to come and take her away? And what can he say except, I'm on my way? And when she passes back the phone, it's back to soggy pancakes and stale coffee. And before he hangs up, your father asks, your son will write about us still, right?
Wow.
Thank you.
So, all of the questions that I had prepared for this poem, you've already answered most of those. But I want to go back to the moment of the poem that touched me so deeply. The
Hmm.
mother not remembering the daughter,
Hmm.
but remembering her former lover. I was like, oh my God, right? And instead of fighting with her mother or trying to get mother to think any differently, she just picks up the phone and calls him.
Hmm.
And how beautiful it is to still have that access. Even though the two of them are no longer together, there's still a sense of family there. And I thought that that was
Hmm.
so beautiful. Um, there's such a tenderness in that poem and a toughness at the same time. And I think that's throughout the book. There's a
Hmm.
tenderness and a toughness, and they just trade places off and on throughout the book the whole
Hmm.
time. Um, all those years and the people inside them deep into the earth and kissed each gravestone. The fact that these things were buried, but they were buried with a kiss.
Hmm.
There's still that tenderness and everything that is there. I do have a question though.
Yeah.
The sister that is referred to, it is your mother's sister, right?
Yes. Yes.
And
Yeah.
it's your mother's half sister, yes?
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Y'all were a little bit difficult to keep up with. I was like, wait a minute, which branch and which, I was like, hold on just a minute, right? So I
You're
was
doing a
trying to
good
keep
job.
up.
You're doing a
Right.
good
And I was
job.
like, okay, I can't not ask. I just have to ask this, even
Yeah.
though, regardless as to how it makes me look. But I thought that that was really beautiful. And I was also thinking, actually, as you were talking today, I was like, oh, man, what were their family barbecues like? You got kimchi over here, you got ribs over here. What was going on at the family barbecue, right? But I love how this poem captures that tenderness and that toughness, and the fact that no matter what, we're still family.
Hmm.
And the fact that they want you to write about them, to me, it says that they know that there's a value and a worth there. Think about it for a second, Gary. We live in the age of social media, right?
Hmm.
Where everybody is looking at somebody else's story, and usually somebody else who is famous or in the
Yeah.
limelight. And it's so easy for people to forget their own stories and how beautiful this is that they orchestrated it. So you have the literary, but you also have that oral tradition going on all at the same time with the interviews. And that was one of the questions that you haven't answered for me that I still get to ask. Why was it important for you to preserve the music of your mother's voice? because you wrote about that in the early part of the book, that you
Yeah.
wanted to preserve the music of her voice. Why was that important to you?
Yeah. No, thank you for asking that, Tamara. And yes, like 100% co-sign on everything you said about how we live in this age where um there are certain stories that get amplified, right? Or certain lives that get amplified. And we're all kind of, I feel like as a culture now, we're all kind of trained that these are the stories that we are supposed to champion or retell or cherish or whatever you want to call it. And so much in my writing I think a lot about like what we were talking about right now. Like what about the stories of the everyday people in our lives? You know, the person like down the street right now, like fixing the pothole in the road has a story just as interesting as, you know, the story that I'm talking about with you right now. Um, and if there's anything I could do with the rest of my life in terms of as a poet or as a writer, as an artist, it would be to keep trying to allow those stories to kind of to bloom or to blossom. Um, and so with that in mind, you know, when I was doing those interviews with my mother, I could say a little bit too about, especially for the audience. So like I know Tamara, you're referencing, right? Like I had set out these rules that
Hmm.
I lay out at the beginning of the book. So when anybody picks up the book, they can kind of see like what kind of guidelines I was following for that particular form. Those erasure interviews. And the process for doing that was, you know, it was years later. If, you know, just to reiterate that, like, I'd done those interviews with my mother back in 2010 or so. It wasn't until probably like 2017 that I went back with the intention to record them and transcribe them and like turn them into these erasure poems. So almost a decade had passed, honestly. Um, and when I was listening to them, Tamara, I just thought like, my God, if I turn this into a poem, going back to that idea of like me being aware of my biases and things, I'm like, I'm gonna use line breaks and I'm gonna, you know, kind of change the language so it kind of conforms to whatever I think this poem needs in this different form. And I'm sure that would have been fine. But I thought like, but it will lose something if I do that. And it's gonna lose the character of her voice, the musicality of her voice, which I know you referenced from my own rules and I thought like, and this is an opportunity to let her have the space kind of entirely to herself, or as much as I can allow, right? Because it's still going to be in this book, and I'm still making these editorial decisions about what language to cut. Um, but I really, really wanted to let as much of her voice come through as possible without any like alteration um, or the things that we think of when we have to like adapt a narrative to like this new form or genre. Um, there was a moment I thought about even having her record herself read the erasure poems. Um, but it never got to that, and my mother is kind of shy. She's not when she's talking with me, but yeah, I was like, I don't want to like thrust her in the spotlight either. So, um, but yeah, that was part of my thinking. Did I answer your question, or was I just rambling?
You did. You
Okay.
did. And
Okay.
and I'm sitting here thinking the whole time that you're talking how gracious of you and how deeply thoughtful and also how forward thinking of you, right? Because in this shuffle right now of technology and the internet, so many things are going to get lost in
Hmm.
the shuffle. And it's almost as if you were thinking in advance, you know what I mean? And
Yeah.
preserving certain things that could so easily be lost. And that preservation reminds that person as well as us how precious it is, you know.
Yeah.
And I think that's really beautiful. And I also think it's kind of remarkable too because, okay, I'm being very binary in this moment, but I'm always thinking about how it's usually the women who preserve the stories, right? Because
Right.
in my projects, I'm always getting stories from my mother. And of course, the men in my family told stories and things like that, but that holding of them and
Yeah.
gathering them, that's why it was so hard for me to find men that, I wanted to bring here for this. And so I'm also thinking about how beautiful it is that all of this is being held in the arms of a man. And we're going to talk a little bit more about that a little
Yeah.
later.
Yeah.
But I want us to move forward back a
Yeah.
page to Dear Siri.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I'll read this one. And I will say, like, just a quick thing. This is my aunt, and even though it's Siri, like everyone in my family always pronounce it city. And
Ah,
so and
thank
so
you.
that's no, it's okay. But that is but I'm only saying that because, later in life when I reconnected with her, of course everybody in her family and her husband and her children call her Siri because that is her name. But it was just another one of those interesting linguistical kind of dialect, kind of frictions that I was reminded of. I was like, oh, all these years, I just always just assumed city when I heard her name in family stories, not realizing it was actually pronounced Siri, even though we all call her city. So
Yeah.
anyway, and I think one of the other poems earlier references that too, but so I'll say it the way like I was raised to say it, but yeah, it is Siri. Dear City, 1963. Foolish girl, you wonder why I lie, why I tell them you are not mine. You are too young to understand shame. Every plum has a past. When you puncture the skin, you don't think of where it's been, but how it tastes. If someone has already bitten the fruit, left the flesh exposed in the sun, would you still eat? When you are older, you will understand how to preserve blood.
So remind me again, who is speaking and who is she speaking to? To whom is she speaking?
Yeah. So in this poem in particular, it's my grandmother, my maternal Korean grandmother speaking
Okay.
to her daughter, um, Siri. And so I think just to zoom out a little bit, I think there are about four or maybe five poems that are all like Dear either City, Siri or Dear Kimberly. And so my thinking was within those poems, it's the grandmother talking to her two daughters. Um, and so that voice kind of, and I think it's the only time I kind of take on my grandmother's voice. Um, but yeah, so they kind of run throughout the arc of the book too.
And so Siri is also your aunt, right?
Yes, yeah. And she's one of the people in my family I am not very close with, not for any reason, but I just, by the time I was around, she was already, living out in DC and we just never had too much contact until ironically enough after the book came out or after I published my first book. Um, so so that's maybe another conversation, but there are certain characters I in some ways I felt more comfortable kind of taking on. My mother, obviously, I think my grandfather at times, my grandmother, but City, I rarely take on her voice except for in that poem, the previous poem Reunion, where she kind of is kind of one of the main characters in that poem. But yeah, yeah.
How do you preserve blood, Gary?
Well, I will say, I think um, my grandmother would argue that you preserve it by like presenting your best self, um, and ensuring that your offspring, your children, will go on to be more prosperous than you were. That was my grandmother's thinking. And so to her, it's like I'm gonna get to America. I'm gonna do what I need to do, and I'm gonna say what I need to say to make sure I get out of this country, Korea, and get to a better country, America, and let my children have access to things I did not have access to. Um, Now, obviously, when she got to America in the 60s, my grandmother was like, uh-oh, I might have messed up. Um, and so the idea of like, one of the things too is that like she, and I think a lot of Korean civilians at the time, um, didn't quite understand that like even though an American soldier is an American soldier, a Black American soldier is is not treated the same way as a white American soldier. And there are stories about that. Like my grandmother, of course, had other good friends. She had one really good friend named Miss Rucker, and Miss Rucker also married a Black um, soldier that she met during the Korean War and came here, and they stayed friends throughout their entire lives. Um, at my grandmother's funeral, Miss Rucker was there, and I still remember this, and she was crying over my grandmother's like coffin. Um, and unlike my grandmother, Miss Rucker stayed married to her Black husband
Mm.
for the entirety of their, I think for most of their marriage, and like raised their children together and all that stuff too. So that's just to kind of provide like an example as like a counter to my own family narrative where they were all trying to navigate this, right? Like all these Korean women in particular who married these men and came here and then had to figure out like how do I negotiate this country that I thought was supposed to have all of this promise for a better life, and now maybe that's not true,
Hmm.
you know.
Hmm. And it's interesting how that story repeats itself in so many ways for so
Hmm.
many different groups of people, right? All right, so I want us to back up to page 76.
Yeah.
Elegy that was already done before.
Oh, yeah.
And I think that's very appropriate since we're talking about preserving blood.
Yeah. Yeah. Happy to read it. Okay. 76. Okay. Elegy that was already done before. I'm trying to teach these kids about elegy. When one of them asks, how do you grieve? Everyone answers, crying, screaming in the crook of your elbow, trying to muffle your soul when all you're doing is making it harder for the dead to hear what you have to say. Only one student says, drink. I put one toe in and ask, what? He says, Jack Daniels, because I don't have to think. And now I'm thinking about ghosts again. Last month, I talked to your mother on the phone. My mother wanted to show her my book, but ain't that like rubbing it in someone's face that one of us is gone and the other got famous for it? Yet here we are, you still dead, and I'm a fool to think the last poem was the last one I'd write about you. At parties, people who don't know that too much ash sours the soil ask about you. I buried two fingers in my temple, one fingernail buried under skin, the other not far behind. Everything is about loss, about stories, about superheroes, about trying to show these motherfucking students what an elegy is really about. It's about the student who asked, who's your favorite superhero? And I said Spider-Man when I should have said you.
So obviously, that was a big influence on the blurb,
Yeah.
a big influence. So I'm going to give you a chance to come clean, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Who's your favorite superhero?
Oh, well, now if we're really talking about superheroes, it really is Spider-Man.
Nope, I'm not talking about Spider
But
Man. Don't even go there.
but if we're talking about like people in my life,
Mhm.
it is my mother. It truly is. Even though this poem is not about my mother because she's very much alive, but it is my mother. And I think this book is kind of a gesture towards that acknowledgement. Just Um, because I think all of us feel that way, right? Regardless if it's cliche or not. I think, at least from my own experience, like as a little kid, I had no idea the things my mother had to do to do what she did, to raise these children, to bury her children, to navigate this world that she was thrust into. Um, like the things in this book that kind of hint at explicitly or implicitly, her parents essentially abandoned her. She had to live with her grandmother. I mean, just all the thing, she got pregnant when she was like a teenager still essentially. Um, and so, and as a kid, you have no idea these things that your parents navigate. Um, and that it's not even just for survival, right? Like survival is plenty, but now you got to take care of these two little beings that that you're also trying to care for and preserve your own relationships with your family and make a living, get insurance, all these things that I feel like so many I certainly took for granted when I was coming up. And so I still can't imagine how she did it, you know. So she is my favorite superhero.
Do you think you'll ever be finished writing that elegy?
No, no, not for any of them, probably. Um, because I mean, and this goes back, I think, to Tamara, to memory, and I don't know exactly what other folks' writing processes are, but for me, I could just be walking down the street and hear like just a snippet of like a song or a random phrase or packet of language in like a conversation happening somewhere. And it takes me back and triggers some moment or some memory that I had entirely forgotten. Um, and sometimes I'm moved to like maybe on the verge of tears or just intense joy or happiness at remembering this thing that I had thought was lost, just just in you know in the halls of your memory. And I'm like, I gotta write about that because now I'm afraid I'm gonna lose it again, if I don't. So yeah, that's a long-winded way of saying no. I'll never stop probably
And it's
writing.
another way of preserving blood, you know?
Yeah.
It's another preservation method. All right, so I need you to go to page 79.
Yes, love to.
Multiple men.
Okay,
Oh,
yeah.
and we gonna talk. We're gonna talk.
Yeah.
I got some things to tell you. Go ahead. Just
Okay.
page 79.
Okay.
Let's
Yeah.
do it. Because I've been
Okay.
waiting to jump into this piece. Okay? Go
Well, now
ahead.
I can't wait to hear
Oh,
what you got to
yes.
say. Yeah. Okay. Multiple band guest starring me and you. Every night I sleep on alternate sides of the bed as if to duplicate sleeping with you. If I'm fast enough, I'm the warmth of my own body beside me. Reach out and touch myself. Breach the blue of my bones. Breathe in my own ear. You left me. Lying here, I left you to be with me. Someone asks if your body was worth trading for mine. My sin was always pride. Did you want a man who sleeps with himself to keep the bed warm? I need you like the earth needed the flood after dearth.
So, my note on this poem is a mighty blues poem.
Mm-hmm.
Okay?
Thank you.
So, I really don't have any questions. Okay?
Okay.
But what I want to tell you is that I called at least four women and read this poem to them. Four,
Oh my
right?
goodness.
And the reaction was similar from all four women, right? About how deeply beautiful and transparent this piece was. One woman said, when actually two women I think said this. When you first started reading, I thought it was a woman who wrote it.
Huh.
Okay, there you go. There
Okay.
you go. You know what that means,
Yeah.
right? Um, and then one woman said, it's beautiful how it's not gender specific and how it can cover so many things, right? And then the confession about falling because of pride. And we were in these different conversations with these women about this poem. We were just talking about how powerful and how beautiful it was that you could articulate that, right? Because and you're doing it for so many who can't. And I had one conversation with one woman, and I believe it was my sister. And I said, think about how many women we have known and that we still know who will never hear anything like that. And we just had to sit quiet for a few seconds on the phone, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because I think most of us who do that personal work, I think most of us realize that men do feel very, very deeply. What we have to wrestle with sometimes, though, is they don't know how to articulate it, or perhaps we don't understand their language,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Mm-hmm.
But you had a way of writing it in a language that we can understand. And I just wanted to say thank you
Oh my goodness.
for
Thank
this
you.
poem because it's no I was just having and I kid you not, it was just on Friday. I had a conversation with a male poet, and he was saying something about the power of women writers. And I don't remember his exact words, but he was saying how very often men write, well, I can do this, and then I can do this. You know, it's that bragado, a little bit of that bragado kind of thing a lot of times. He said, but when women write, he said, certain women write, there's just something different that's going on there. And he said to me, he said, one of the greatest comments that I've ever received was that something sounded like a woman wrote it. And I just had this conversation on Friday.
Huh.
So then I'm going through I was like, oh, this is one of those pieces, right? And, you know, women can be really arrogant sometimes, thinking that we're the ones that feel the deepest and that we know
Mhm.
more about intimacy than men or whatever. But this right here, I was like, drop the mic. I don't think in my mind you can't get any more vulnerable than that. And that's so damn risky. But it's
Mhm.
so powerful at the same time, right? So I don't have any questions, but it was just important for that to be out there in the world. And you don't have to say a single thing. You don't have to say nothing, right?
Well, thank you. I would just say thank you. I feel like that is just one of the highest compliments I've gotten on a poem. So I really appreciate it. If a poem of mine makes you call up four women
Four,
or four, and read it,
four.
like I must be doing something okay if that's if that was a response. So thank you. And yeah,
Yeah.
thank you for sharing that. And I'll just say that like a lot of these poems, even though that obviously is like a like you said, I love, the idea that it's like a blues poem, right? Like a heartbreak poem. And I just needed to sneak that in there, and a couple other poems I think kind of revolve around that same dynamic. Um, just to kind of break up the kind of like familial myth, arc that's in the book. But I'm always a big fan of being as complicit as we can be in our work, and so I'm always more interested in a speaker who is willing to be flawed and kind of speak to their complicitness and whatever the act is, good or bad. And so just thank you. I appreciate it. That's
Well,
all.
thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. All right, so we're gonna wrap with watch. And I wanna say before you read it, um, it's another love poem.
It is.
right? Because I felt like Multiple Men was a love poem on one end of the spectrum, and this is another love poem. So share watch for us, please.
Yes, I will. Watch. Tonight, my mother calls. You better keep a watch out in your city. I remind her, I don't go to church, so you knew I was safe. You need to stop. She reminds me of fear older than me that if given the chance to argue for my own right to live, I could still be denied. We drove cross country in a U-Haul and a car, and when the cop pulled each of us over, he asked the same questions. Where are you going? What do you do for a living? When my mother told him her son was a professor, you must be proud. It took a week to calm her down, as if being calm helped anything. Tomorrow, I will try to teach poets they should bear witness to the world they walk through, but we all hesitate to confront so much white space. Tomorrow, my wife will sob in her sleep and wake up and grab me. And when I ask if she had a bad dream, she will say, yeah. There are two women in my life who will always fear what happens to my body, and this awareness makes me more aware of my own body than I have ever been. And there's no way to communicate this to you who are not in this body. You just have to trust when I say it's exhausting work to keep a watch out in my city, to keep a watch in every city we have ever lived.
It's something to hear you read the poem. I think when I read the poem, I was wrapped up in prepping for this moment, right? When you read the poem, I thought of my husband and I thought of all of my sons. Um, and I don't have any questions, but I do want to repeat this line I was writing as you were speaking. I could be denied my own right to live. All of us could be denied our own rights to live. To have denial and right in the same line, right?
Mm-hmm.
And it also reminds me of the state of so many things going on in the world right now, right?
Mm-hmm.
And how exhausting it is to live in that kind of world where your rights could easily be denied to live,
Mm-hmm.
like literally to live.
Mm-hmm.
And I just felt like, again, it was a different kind of love poem, and that was just a very appropriate way to close.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it goes back to that same thing of the tender and the tough all in the same poem, and how beautiful that you evoke your mother and your wife, the other woman who loves you in ways that nobody else will. It's really, really beautiful.
Thank
Really
you,
beautiful.
Tamara. Yeah. And I appreciate you saying it's another type of love poem too,
Yes.
which is something I forget sometimes when because I think when most people talk about that poem, of course, they're talking about, this, just how accessible and how easy it is to commit violence, especially against Black bodies with seemingly no repercussions. Um, but yeah, but that aspect of the love poem and that comes in through there. Yeah, I appreciate you kind of reminding me even of that. So yeah.
Yeah, because part of the love in that is daring to birth a son,
Yes.
right? Part of the love in that is daring to marry a black man, right?
Hmm.
When you know the risks that are there,
Hmm.
that says a whole lot. So I saw it definitely as a love poem. So
Yeah.
thank you.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's
And
humbling. Oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
no,
Yeah.
it's just feeling real tender right now. Go ahead.
Yeah.
What were you about to
Oh,
say?
I was just gonna say, and it's humbling for me to be reminded of that because I'm here worried about my wife and my mother, right? For very similar reasons. And so it always makes me take a step back and feel a little bit humble that there are these women in my life who are so worried about my body and what happens to me. Um, and that goes back to, me just calling my mother a superhero. It's just like, oh my gosh, she has so many things she can worry about too, and that I worry for her. And yet she still, in a lot of ways puts her concern for me first, which just still amazes me.
Okay, so I'm going to shift the tone. You
Yeah.
said my wife.
Yes.
You're still married?
Yes. Yes. Yes, I
Okay,
am.
you do realize you still married because you understood that you needed that flood, right?
Yes.
Like the earth needed the flood after that. I just needed to say that. I just needed to say that. Because I'm going to go ahead on and admit that in one of the conversations with one of those black women, I was like, girl, I wonder if he's still married, right? Because,
Yeah. It was
so
shaky. It was shaky. Therefore,
look, it
yeah.
always
Yeah.
is. It always is. There's always that point, I think, and I think it's more than one point. There's always those
Yeah.
moments where it's going to be shaky and we have to decide, are we going to hold on or are we
Yeah.
going to let go? Did you let go? And I'm still, you know what I mean? It's
Right.
that constant thing. And I'm so glad you answered that question without me having to ask it directly,
Yeah.
right? I was
Yeah.
like, ooh, I bet you he's still married, right? Because he gets it, right? So
Uh-huh.
anyway, I just wanted to say that and tell you thank you again. So tell us, what are you up to now? I caught you before your book tour. So tell us what the new
Yeah.
project is.
Yeah, so I had a new book that just came out in last fall. Oh my God, time is so elastic. So yeah, like last September, and the new book is with the same press, and I got a copy of it here. It's called Small Lives. Um, and it is very different from Origin Story in terms of content, although I think if the persona poems and that kind of um the kind of voice or the characteristics like somebody would argue that a lot of my poems have in terms of kind of how there's like a tenderness, like you said, and kind of a brutality and toughness there simultaneously. I think a lot of that is coming through in the new book too. But the new book is like purely speculative. And so in this world, it is governed by like kind of three core personas who are all like superhumans of color. And you kind of see this arc of them like kind of becoming like the Justice League type, beloved team, and then things completely fall apart and they're kind of hated and persecuted. And then things kind of happen throughout the course of the book that kind of really reflect, even though I wrote this book before our current kind of world, although I feel like we've been living in this world for longer than I think most of us care to admit, but it very much reflects what's going on right now too, in terms of just kind of government sponsored violence and all those things. But yeah, like it's been nice to kind of have this new book out and yeah, the new tour. I'm going back to South Carolina. Um and I'll do like some readings at like Francis Marion University and back in Charleston and Coastal Carolina. And then I'm off to the New Orleans Poetry Festival
Wow.
later in April, which it's a I think a newish festival. And so I'm excited. I've never been out there for this festival before, so that'll be fun. Um, but yeah, it's been nice to kind of have the new book. But I do want to reiterate, Tamara, just how much I appreciate um you inviting me here and giving me the opportunity to talk about origin story because I love that one of the things I really love about what you do and what a lot of artists and writers do is that we don't like just privilege the new thing, right? It's like there's a whole catalog of books that I think we could easily overlook just because it was published like more than 2 years ago, right? And so I love that about poetry, how books can kind of come back into the light for a moment, and we can kind of celebrate them, even if, there are newer books, out there that also get a lot of attention. So yeah, I really do appreciate you having me come on.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm a
Yeah.
firm believer that, a good book doesn't go out of style. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? Chanel isn't the only thing that is classic, right? A good book you can return to again and again. A good book someone may find 50 to 100 years from now, right? And discover a universe or what have you. And so I don't think that books should fall into the America's top 40 kind of, groove and rhythm and
Yeah.
things like that. And I think it's important to disrupt that narrative with some truth. And so it's the same thing with music for me. It's like great music, come on. Great, just because it's not on somebody's list, it doesn't mean that it's no longer great music or that it doesn't have medicine and inspiration for you. And
Right.
so I'm always grateful when somebody says yes to this platform, especially when we're not talking about their newest project, right?
Yeah.
And I remember I had one guest on and I asked him to go all the way back to his like first book. And he was like, really? You want it? I was like, yes, because we're going to talk about your growth and your journey. And graciously, he decided yes. And
Yeah.
so it worked. So thank you for that encouragement. I received that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm telling you, Terry, I could talk to you all day about just family and relationships, and I've had a ball. Like, this has been great.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for um, making this a stop right before your tour. And we wish you wonderful adventures on your tour and safe journeys. And for those of you who are watching, thank you for showing up for this new episode of Breakdown. We hope that you will encourage the poet by buying the books, attending a workshop, or going to a reading, what have you. Share this episode, like, share your reflections and your comments. And we thank you again, Poet Gary Jackson, and audience. We welcome you again to the next Breakdown the Poet and the Poems.
This opportunity is made possible through the Literary Arts Projects, a program of South Arts.